Have you ever taken a moment to confront that uncomfortable truth you've been avoiding for so long? That quiet, persistent feeling that lingers in the back of your mind, waiting patiently for your attention, even though you try your best to ignore it. It doesn't demand your focus or shout for recognition, but it's always present. Often, it appears in the form of rejection. Rejection, the very thing you fear and try to avoid at all costs, is not actually your adversary. In fact, it could be one of your strongest allies. This is not an attempt to romanticize pain or soften the harsh reality of rejection. Rejection wounds deeply, it burns, it shakes your confidence, and it challenges your sense of self-worth. However, it also holds the power to awaken something within you that you believed was lost forever. Why does rejection cause so much pain? Because it isn't really about the other person. It reflects more about you, about the parts of yourself you try to hide, the needs you refuse to acknowledge, and the unresolved issues that linger within. When someone turns you away, it doesn't simply hurt your pride. It reveals the vulnerable aspects of yourself you've been reluctant to face. You haven't yet recognized that rejection acts as a mirror, reflecting the stories you still hold about not being enough. Consider this: which part of you reacts when you face rejection? What old wound is reopened? What fear appears unexpectedly, yet feels familiar? Rejection isn't random. It shows up at exactly the right moment. It arrives when you are ready to grow, when it's necessary to gain clarity. It comes as a tough teacher, not to break you, but to remove all illusions. Perhaps you're recalling a recent experience now, the last time you faced rejection. You can still sense the sting, the disappointment, the feeling of something inside you fracturing once again. But let me ask you this: what if rejection was actually the best thing that could have happened? What if it didn't destroy you, but instead initiated you into a new version of yourself, one that no longer needs to seek acceptance from others? When you rely on others' approval for your self-worth, you become vulnerable and dependent. You give away your strength to opinions beyond your control. In doing so, you lose touch with your true self, weakening your presence and diminishing what genuinely makes you captivating. Genuine attraction doesn't stem from being liked. It comes from feeling complete within yourself, no longer needing external validation to feel important. When you stop seeking acceptance from everyone around you, you begin to exude a calm confidence that people notice, even if they can't quite explain why. The world recognizes when you no longer require its approval, and that's when your true power starts to emerge. Here's a difficult reality to face: the more you pursue someone's attention, the more likely they are to pull away. This happens because the human mind naturally recoils from neediness. Even if your intentions are pure and your heart is kind, if your energy signals, "I need you to approve me," you inadvertently create pressure, and pressure drives people away. This is why detachment holds power, not because it makes you cold or uncaring, but because it uncovers a deeper truth: you are inherently enough. You have never needed to persuade anyone to recognize your worth. The real question is, how do you? To achieve that state of true inner self-reliance is both challenging and freeing. It requires confronting your shadow, that is, turning toward the parts of yourself you've hidden, suppressed, or denied, the insecurities, the shame, and the fear of not being accepted. Jung referred to this process as individuation, which involves bringing together all your fragmented, scattered parts into a unified, conscious self. Only through this integration can you finally stop relying on external approval to feel worthy. Once you embark on this path, you come to a remarkable realization: no one can reject you unless you allow it. Every time you compromised your values to gain acceptance, every time you reshaped yourself to meet others' expectations, you weren't rejected for your authentic self, you were rejected for the persona you presented. This is the paradox. The pain doesn't come from being true to yourself. Being noticed can sometimes cause pain when we hide our true selves. The more you try to fit into others' expectations, the more you lose touch with your authentic identity. When rejection eventually happens, it's not a denial of who you really are, but a refusal of the facade you've presented. This means the discomfort you experience isn't failure. It's a signal, a reminder that the version of yourself seeking approval isn't the one that's genuinely free. The genuine attraction people feel is not about manipulation or psychological tactics. It's the presence of someone who no longer depends on validation from others, someone who has fully embraced themselves, confidently and without hesitation. We live in a society filled with individuals eager to be accepted, who bend and reshape themselves to blend in. Yet, only a few have the courage to stand firm in their true identity. If you want to stand out, stop waiting for approval. Start moving forward on your own terms. Even when no one understands your path, especially then, that's where true personal power exists. In silence, in solitude, in the choice to be alone. Not because of weakness, but because of strength. This kind of solitude sends a message. People sense it even if they can't explain why. That is genuine attraction, the kind that doesn't rely on effort or manipulation. It's not about needing others to choose you, it's about finally choosing yourself. The world doesn't chase after those who are chasing it. Instead, it moves toward those who stand firm in their truth, those who stop pleading for attention and begin living as if they've already arrived. But to live this way, to embody this calm strength, you have to stop running from the thing that shaped you, rejection. Most people spend their lives fearing the word no. They avoid it, hide from it, and structure their lives around preventing it. But here's the real issue. The worst rejection you'll face isn't from others, it's the rejection you turn inward. Think about how often you've denied your own wants just to fit in. How many times have you ignored your true feelings, thoughts, or desires just to be accepted? And after all that self-denial, the approval you sought never arrived, or if it did, it felt empty because it wasn't meant for the real you. It was for the version of you created to please others. And even then, you were still rejected, not because you were too much or not enough, but because you stopped being yourself. Here lies a major misunderstanding. We see rejection as a threat to our worth. In reality, rejection is a guide leading us back to our worth. Every no acts like a mirror. Every dismissal is an invitation. Rejection doesn't deceive, it exposes. It reveals where you're still scared, where you're fragmented, where your past wounds still control you. So instead of avoiding rejection, what if you truly paid attention to each rejection you faced? What lessons could you learn from them? Which part of you still feels unworthy unless chosen or accepted? What story do you hold on to that tells you love must be earned by sacrificing your true self? This is the deep wound, the belief that you have to change who you are to be loved. Healing does not come from persuading others to accept you. It comes from no longer needing their acceptance to begin with. This is the work of the shadow self, the hidden, rejected parts of you that you've tried to hide behind perfection, charm, success, or silence. But the shadow never truly disappears. It waits quietly, watching, influencing your decisions and behaviors. It shapes the situations you claim to want to avoid, until you finally acknowledge it. That's why your relationships often follow the same patterns. That's why you encounter similar disappointments repeatedly. Not because you're unlucky or cursed, but because your inner self is sending signals, and rejection is the way it communicates. So, what would happen if you listened? What if, just once, you stopped seeing rejection as a punishment and started viewing it as a lesson? What if instead of asking, "Why did they leave me?" you asked, "What part of myself did I abandon long before they did?" That's where true strength begins. When you stop fearing rejection, it loses its power over you. When you stop rejecting yourself, no one else can wound you the way you used to hurt yourself. This isn't about becoming numb, it's about becoming genuine, honest, and whole. You start acting from truth rather than from a plan or a mask. You stop trying to fit into what others expect and begin focusing on what you truly need. That's when you stop performing and start truly living. And something remarkable follows. The world reflects your strength. Not because you forced it, but because you no longer needed it to. There's a turning point in your journey, if you're paying attention, when you stop asking why you were rejected and start questioning why you ever needed acceptance from others at all. This moment doesn't come easily. It only arrives after the illusions fall apart, after you've tried everything. Pleasing, performing, pretending, yet still feeling empty, misunderstood, or alone. It arrives when the pain of being rejected by others becomes less than the pain of abandoning yourself over and over again. That's when a powerful shift happens. You no longer view rejection as something that breaks you. Instead, you see it as something that reveals your true self. Suddenly, you're no longer desperate for acceptance. You become desperate for honesty because the truth is, you've spent too long trying to earn a place at someone else's table while your own soul was begging you to create your own. This is where genuine self-respect begins, not through applause, but through silence. The understanding eventually dawns. No amount of external validation can replace the absence of inner alignment. When you're disconnected from who you are, no compliment will feel genuine, no affection will seem secure, and no achievement will bring true satisfaction. In that light, rejection becomes an unexpected form of grace. It turns your focus inward, cuts through distractions, and dissolves illusions, leaving only what's real. And the truth is this: you were never intended to be everything for everyone. You were meant to become everything for yourself. When this realization settles in, it shifts everything, not instantly, but profoundly and lastingly. You begin to speak with purpose, not to impress, but because you've stopped concealing who you are. You start entering rooms without shrinking or inflating your presence. You stop adjusting who you are to make others feel at ease. You no longer feel the need to apologize for your drive, your sensitivity, your silence, or your strength. You stop compressing yourself into smaller shapes just to be more acceptable. And it's then that the world starts responding differently. Because confidence isn't about volume, arrogance, or control. Real confidence is quiet. It's calm presence. There's a quiet confidence in someone who no longer feels the need to prove themselves, an unshakable calm in a person with nothing to defend and nothing to chase. That kind of presence is rare, and incredibly compelling. You stop seeking attention. You stop forcing connections. You no longer twist yourself into someone else just to be accepted, because you've already accepted yourself. And in doing so, you've shifted the dynamic completely. You've stepped away from the performance and stepped fully into your own life. This is where many misunderstand attraction, especially when it comes to so-called rules of magnetism and influence. It's not about pretending not to care in order to manipulate. It's not about holding back just to spark curiosity. That's still a form of acting, still rooted in a sense of lack. True power shows up when you honestly don't need anything from anyone. When you've confronted your inner fears so thoroughly that being alone no longer feels like a threat. When solitude no longer feels like emptiness, but becomes a place of peace. Let me know if you'd like to continue paraphrasing the next part or adjust the style in any way. When people begin to draw closer, not because you chase them, but because your presence quietly reminds them of something they've been missing. Someone complete, sincere, and self-assured, someone who doesn't need to be needed. But how do you become that person? You take the step most avoid, facing the part of yourself that still believes you're not enough. You listen to the voice you've tried to silence, the one that says you're too much, or that you won't be loved unless you change. You don't argue with it. You don't shut it out. You sit with it. You let it speak. And then you trace it back to where it first appeared. Maybe it came from a parent who only offered love when you succeeded. Maybe it was a teacher who ignored you. Or maybe it started in a relationship where your needs were treated as a burden. Weakness, no matter its origin, isn't truth, it's conditioning. And the only way to free yourself from it is to face it directly. That's the essence of shadow work. It's the path of individuation. This is the legacy Carl Jung left us, to become whole by embracing every part of ourselves we've cast aside, our fears, desires, inner conflicts, and unmet emotional needs. Only by doing this can we stop living on autopilot, stop projecting our wounds onto others, and finally break the recurring patterns in our relationships. Only then can we stop pointing fingers at rejection and begin to understand it. Rejection always brings insight. It reveals exactly where you're still looking for external approval. It highlights the parts of yourself that still need development. And it keeps asking you, again and again, who are you willing to become? Will you finally choose yourself, truly and fully? Even when no one else does. And the moment your answer becomes yes, not just in words, but in action, something changes. A door opens. You start living from a different place. You stop waiting for approval. You stop holding back. You stop asking to be seen. You begin to occupy space, calmly, confidently, without resentment, without ego, and without apology. You're no longer trying to prove you're enough. You simply know you are. And that self-assurance transforms everything. You realize that much of what you were chasing in others, recognition, validation, care, even freedom, were things you hadn't yet offered to yourself. Those who turned away from you weren't rejecting your true self. They were distancing themselves from the version of you still searching for worth outside yourself. But now, you bring that search to an end. You stop outsourcing your value. You bring it home. You become your own foundation. And in doing so, ironically, That's when everything else starts to align. You're magnetic not because you're trying to attract others, but because you've stopped trying altogether. People notice the difference. They sense when you've let go of the need for approval. They may not be able to explain it, but they respect it. It's uncommon. It's genuine. It's powerful. Most importantly, it's yours. You've become someone who no longer fears closed doors, because you understand that not all doors are meant to open. Sometimes, the greatest sense of peace arrives when one closes, revealing the truth it had been keeping from you. You no longer view rejection as a sign of failure. You see it as guidance, a quiet message from the universe saying, "Not this way, keep moving forward. There's something better ahead." And over time, something even deeper takes place. You no longer need rejection to guide you, because you're already paying attention. You've developed clarity. You've learned to tune into your own energy. You've stopped stepping into spaces that you no longer settle for less than you deserve when something doesn't align with your values, because you've remembered that you were never meant to accept scraps. You were always the whole feast. And here's the final paradox. The less you seek validation, the more naturally it comes to you. The less you chase after love, the more it finds its way to you. The less you fear rejection, the more you see that it never truly had control over you. Because now, you've grasped a deeper truth. No one can reject you more deeply than you once rejected yourself. And no one can offer you greater love than what you're finally ready to give yourself. So, what comes next? You start attracting relationships that mirror your wholeness, not ones driven by need, but by genuine connection. Not relationships that try to complete you, but those that enhance who you already are. Not ones that demand your focus, not on performance but on inviting your presence. At this point, you no longer ask, "Do you see me?" Instead, you live with the mindset, "I see myself, and that is enough." So, when someone rejects you next time, allow it to happen. Let them leave. Let the door close. Let the silence linger. But this time, do not chase, do not plead, do not break down. Instead, ask yourself, what part of me was still waiting for their approval? What truth about who I am I now prepared to accept, even if no one else does? That moment marks the return of your strength. That is when the pain transforms into an opening. That is when rejection ceases to be a threat and instead becomes a teacher. So here's the challenge. Don't avoid rejection. Face it. Let it instruct you. Let it burn away what is false. Let it expose what is genuine. Because what is genuine cannot be. What was taken from you and your true self, once recalled, can never be denied again. You're not here to be selected. You are here to choose yourself every single day until it becomes less of a choice and more of your nature. If this message resonated with you on a deeper level, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to The Selves for more content like this, where we dive into the realities behind your thoughts, emotions, and personal growth. Before you leave, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What part of yourself are you finally ready to stop denying? Let's begin a meaningful conversation. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to awaken. See you in the next video.